Did you know that the Gardener's Workshop offers seed starting supplies? On our site, you'll only find the equipment that we love and use ourselves. It's all Flower Farmer approved. So visit our online store today at thegardenersworkshop.com. The Gardener's Workshop, turning all thumbs green. Hey everyone, welcome to the Field and Garden Podcast. I'm Jessie from the Gardener's Workshop. Today's episode features a takeover of our popular weekly live Q&A session on Instagram called Ask a Flower Farmer. This one was hosted by Dave Dowling of Ball Color Link. Dave is also a former flower farmer and the instructor for our online course, Flower Farming School Online, Bulbs, Perennials, Woodies, and more. Dave is always happy to share his knowledge with our listeners, and here he answers questions about lilies, ranunculus, peonies, lisianthus, calla lilies, and so much more. So listen in, and I hope you enjoy.
Hi folks, welcome to Ask the Flower Farmer Live. I'm filling in for Lisa Ziegler today. So my name is Dave Dowling. I work with Lisa on the class that we did called Bulbs, Perennials, and Woodies, and more for cut flower farmers. My class and any other classes that are from the Gardener's Workshop, you can find all those on the Gardener's Workshop webpage, which is thegardenersworkshop.com. Today is Wednesday, April 24th. Spring is pretty well underway for people down south. Tulip season is over. Lilacs are done if you had lilacs. People up north, I was talking to somebody up in Massachusetts, and their tulips are just getting full swing now, and they'll have them for about two and a half weeks, and then tulip season is over up north. If you're farther north in Canada or some colder region of the world, your tulips may be just getting started, and then from start to finish, it's a quick 2.5 to 3 weeks, and tulips are done. But now is the time to start thinking about tulips if you're going to be growing them for next spring. You want to order them sometime soon. Don't wait till September and October and looking for tulips because all the good ones are already sold. You want to place your orders with your supplier soon so you get on the list of customers who want those varieties. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Dave Dowling. I had a cut flower farm in Maryland for 20 years. Stopped doing that about 10 years ago, and then went to work for Edney Flower Bulb, which became the Fred Glockton Company. And that sold to the Ball Seed or Ball Color Link. So that's where I work now with the Ball Color Link office as a cut flower sales rep to customers all across the country, across the U.S. And I also do a lot of behind the scenes work here at Ball with new products and other stuff like that. So I see some questions, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Bloom by Taylor Creekside. Growing lilies in crates in Wilmington, North Carolina. Do I need to put lilies under the shade cloth in the heat of the summer, growing the LA hybrids? If you're growing the LA hybrid, you don't have to have a shade cloth for them, but it's definitely, if you're down in North Carolina, it gets pretty hot down there, it wouldn't hurt. If you're growing orientals in the middle of summer, they will get sunburned if you're succession planting them to try and have flowers in July and August. So you definitely want shade cloth for that. The best shade cloth to use is a 50% shade. You can either build a structure to hold it or put it over the hoops of a tunnel. But the shade cloth does two things. It keeps them from getting sunburn and also means you don't have to water quite as much because it prevents them from drying out so quick in the hot sun. Heaven Sent Flower Farm. They just purchased acreage for my flower farm. Any tips for mending raw land and what plants to concentrate on now in the early years for a brand new flower farm in Texas, Zone 8B? Well, when you say it's raw land, was it a cow pasture before, or are you ripping out trees and scrub your brush and you've got rocks and everything else to deal with? So that makes a big difference. If you're lucky and it was just like a horse field or a cow field and it's decent soil, you need to first get rid of the grass because grass in any farm, if you don't get rid of it when you start, it's going to cause problems forever. So you can mow it really short, put tarp over it to kill it. Especially down in Texas, you can do heat solarization. You put black tarps over it, billboard tarps or a silage tarp. Something that's solid and doesn't let any water through and doesn't let anything grow up through the cracks, so to speak. And cook that area for a good 6-8 months all summer to kill all the weeds and the grass that's growing. Then this fall, first thing we do is a soil test to see what kind of fertility you might already have there, and then see what kind of amendments you may need. You may need to use lime to raise the pH. And then any fertility you need to add. And if your soil is really high in clay or really sandy, It's always helpful to get a lot of organic matter in it. And if you're making a new farm, there's no reason to put organic matter where you'll be driving the truck and the tractor and the pathways. So save that organic matter for the actual bed areas. Don't waste expensive compost in spots where you're not going to be growing plants. And what plants to concentrate on? Start with the easy stuff first. Do the annuals, sunflowers, celosia, zinnias, and then work your way up to other perennials that would work in Texas in your area. Woody shrubs, if you want to get into those. But start with the annuals. They're the easiest thing to do. But one thing I want to say, starting a new farm, always get irrigation in place because it's the cheapest insurance to have a good crop. Without irrigation, you may never have anything grow at all. Neckley is asking any tips on ranunculus. I'm not sure where you're at, but here's a quick thing on ranunculus. If you're zone 6 or warmer, you can plant them in the fall in October, early October into a high tunnel. You can also do low tunnels if you want to use a low tunnel if you don't have a high tunnel. If you're zone 5 and colder, you're going to want to plant those into a high tunnel or a low tunnel on March 1st. Even if you're up in Maine and Canada where the ground is covered with snow, you should be planting them out March 1st. Because if you don't get them planted out soon enough, they're not going to flower before it gets too hot. And when the heat of late spring comes, the ranunculus will go dormant, and then you won't get any flowers out of them. But the best way is to plant them in the fall. If you go to the ballseed.com/cutflowers website, there's a ranunculus catalog there, and the center pages have instructions on growing ranunculus. So that can be helpful for you. Etrika Cake is asking, can you explain pinching for beginners, especially with the peonies and zinnias, or is it the same for everything? It's definitely not the same for everything. If it was the same for everything, it would be easy. Growing cut flowers is not always easy. Peonies, you don't pinch them. You might disbud them if you don't want to have multiple flowers on a stem. Or if you're selling to a wholesaler, they require that you disbud them and have just one main central flower. Well, you would just disbud them when the buds are about the size of a pea or smaller, and you just twist it in your finger to take it out. And that's not pinching, that's disbudding peonies. Everything else, it depends on the variety. There's some celosias that you pinch and some you should never pinch. Sunflowers, a branching sunflower you can pinch, a non-branching you don't pinch. I was just looking at Lisa Ziegler's new book, the Cut Flower Handbook, and there's a whole section in there on what to pinch, how to pinch, and where to pinch it. So if you don't have that book yet, go to thegardenersworkshop.com and buy the new Cut Flower Handbook that Lisa put out just about 2 months ago. But has some really detailed information. It tells you which zinnias, which celosia to pinch, which ones you don't pinch. Lots of information on pinching. So it's not something you can describe in a 2-minute conversation. Crazy Horse 135. I'm providing flowers for my first wedding. How can I help save my peonies from fully opening until I'm ready? You don't say when the wedding is, but if you don't have peonies open, if you have peonies that you want to use for a wedding and you're not trying to save them for like July or August, you're trying to save them maybe a week or two after they're blooming, you want to harvest those peonies in the marshmallow stage before they're open. Don't ever put them in water. Take off the bottom leaves, wrap them in paper, and put them in a cooler. And then wrap them in paper, put them in a box in a cooler. But they have to be totally dry. No moisture, no dew, no humidity on the plants, on the buds or the stems. And put them in the cooler at about 34 to 35 degrees, and they can stay in there for a month, 6 weeks. You take them out the day before you need to use them, cut the stems, put them in a bucket of water, let them hydrate, then put them back in the cooler till you're ready to use them. But there's nothing that's going to stop a peony from opening up when you get to that wedding. That's a warm 85-degree day. That peony is going to open up. You're not going to keep it closed. Charlie Collis is asking, what plants would I recommend for zone 9B? Well, 9B is hot. So you want all the heat-loving summer annuals. Celosias would do great there. Sunflowers, gomphrena, amaranth, anything that's a summer heat-loving plant. You could grow eucalyptus would work in zone 9B. It would overwinter and be a really big plant. You got to make sure you keep them cut back so it doesn't become a tree in zone 9. But those would be the ones, if you're just starting out, I would start out with those. Zinnias, sunflowers, celosia, and gomphrena, and throw in Blue Horizon ageratum for a filler. And if you can get your hand on some eucalyptus plants, they're really hard to start from seed. You usually want to buy plants, or start the seed back in December for planting this spring. Barbara, she says, I'm growing in Miami. Snaps and other cool flowers are almost done. I'm looking to expand into heat and humidity-friendly bulbs. Do you know any resources for wholesale freesias, Siam tulips, and Gloriosa lilies? Well, first of all, freesias don't take the heat. You would grow those over the winter in Miami and they'd be blooming the same time as your snapdragons and your cool flowers. Freesias will go dormant once the soil gets above about 60 degrees, so you would grow them in the wintertime down there. The tulips, you can buy those from the suppliers. We offer tulips to ball seed. We don't have anybody that sells Gloriosa lilies. Your best option for that is just do a Google search and find them, because they're not in high demand commercial cut flower bulb. So none of the bulb suppliers carry them because they might have one or two people that want to buy them, and it's not worth it to carry something that only one person's going to buy them. And like was mentioned earlier, you can grow lilies in the summer. Just use the LA varieties. They're unscented, but they can take the heat better, but better if you can put them in some shade. Oh, here's a good question from Kafaz. Any tips in growing lisianthus from seed? Well, my first tip is don't do it. But if you really want to grow lisianthus from seed, you're way too late this year. You want to start them back in late December, early January, because it takes 12 weeks to get a plant that has 4 leaves on it. Very slow growing. That means you can't take a vacation, can't go away for a long weekend, because someone else will take care of them for you and most likely kill them. But if you want to grow lisianthus from seed, there is a Facebook group called Lisianthus Seed Starting. It's all about growing lisianthus from seed. But the trick is you plant them, just barely cover them, keep them damp, 70-degree heat mat. They germinate in about a week, but then they seem to just sit there for weeks and weeks and weeks. The trick is to not let them get algae growing on the soil or not overwatering them. But you can start them from seed, but you just have to do it back in late December, early January. Little Flower Farm is asking, do dianthus leaves root? Not the leaves, but you can root dianthus, the stems. You want to get a stem that's not got a flower on it, so just a leaf node. If you're familiar with the green dianthus called either green ball, there's one called green wiki. It's just a green dianthus that never really flowers. Those are all grown from cuttings because they're plants are from tissue culture, but they're grown from cuttings. But dianthus, I think, would be easier to just go ahead and start them from buying plugs already grown for you from a supplier, or start them from seed in the fall. Will Sarah Bernhardt peonies do well in Texas Zone 8B? You're on the borderline there of peonies doing well because your winter's not long and cold enough. Peonies need about 40 days below 40 degrees to be able to be a viable plant. So if you have a really short winter, it may not work. That's one thing with when you talk about zones. The zone is your lowest average temperature. So 8B, I think the lowest temperature is like 20 degrees, but that may only happen for 2 weeks or 2 days. It's very different than somebody that might be a zone 8B, but they're cold for 2 months at a time in the winter. My best bet for you would be to go to a local garden center, and if they sell Sarah Bernhardt peonies, buy one and grow that for a year and see how it works before you go and spend $1,000 on several hundred peonies. But 8B is about the borderline. It would be helpful if you could plant them on the north side of a building so they don't get any sun in the winter, so they stay a little colder. And also so the sun doesn't shine directly on the soil, a north-facing slope. So you don't have that soil warming up from the sun in the wintertime. Busy Cat wants to know, do I need to harden off my sweet peas before planting them out? And also pinch or no pinch? You definitely want to harden them off. Nothing's worse than taking any seedling that you started indoors, whether it's sweet peas, zinnias, anything, and you take them outside and it's sunny or windy and it just destroys them and they're dead. So you definitely want to harden off your plants, no matter what variety, for at least 2 or 3 days, sometimes longer before you put them out. That also includes when you buy in plugs from a supplier. Don't just take those plugs and put them right in the field. Give them a day to acclimate, maybe 2 days to get used to your weather, your light intensity, and the wind at your farm. Pinching sweet peas, most people don't pinch them until they're taller, about 18 or 20 inches, and then you get them to branch out. So you don't want to pinch them real low when you put them in. Kafaz, I just planted bare root peonies last fall. I know it's best to not cut from them for 2 to 3 years. My question is, should I disbud them? It would be helpful to disbud them. The most important thing is don't let them make seed pods. So if you don't disbud them, don't let the flower die and produce a seed pod. What a lot of people do is let them bloom, just make sure that's the color they ordered and there wasn't a mistake somewhere and they got the wrong variety. Or you can also just take and cut that peony when it's blooming with a little 4-inch stem. Don't take any leaves off and just enjoy it yourself in your house. But you could disbud them if you want to, but you don't have to. The main thing is don't let them make seed pods. The leaves of my dianthus Barcelona has spines or spikes growing from them. Is this a disease? No, disease wouldn't be a spike or anything. I'm not familiar with the dianthus Barcelona. I'd have to look that one up. It could just be the way the leaf grows. It's not a disease. Don't encircle flowers. I'm thinking of growing calla lilies this year for fall harvest, zone 6A in Rhode Island. I want to grow them in crates, which is a great way to grow callas. How many per crate would you recommend, and what varieties do I recommend? Should be growing them outside with no cover, but I can move the crates if needed. You only plant 5 bulbs per crate, so basically 1 in each corner and 1 in the middle. If you plant too many, you're going to just get leaves and you'll have fewer flowers per plant, so you don't want to overcrowd them. Grow them in crates is a great way to do it because you can plant them, put them someplace warm to start, because callas like a 70 degrees, 24 hours a day until they're up and growing. And you don't have to water them much then either. So we basically plant the 5 bulbs per crate, water them really well, put them someplace about 70 degrees, which you can take a cooler and put a space heater in there if you don't need the cooler for anything else, or a small room and put a heater in there at 70 degrees. They'll sprout in 2 to 3 weeks. Then they start blooming in 8 or 9 weeks. So they're really quick once they start going. But you want to plant them, water them really well, and then no more water until they're up and the leaves are starting to unfurl. Varieties, any of the Captain, C-A-P-T-A-I-N, varieties are good. Basically, if you're going to be growing for the fall, for fall harvest, you don't want to have pinks and whites. You want the reds, yellows, and oranges. Just pick the right colors, check the height, and the other thing is make sure you buy the biggest bulb you can buy. They sell callas in a size 15, 16 centimeter, which is about not much bigger than a golf ball, all the way up to a size 24 plus, which is the size of a baseball. The bigger bulb costs more, but you're going to get more stems from it, and you make more profit by buying big bulbs versus buying smaller bulbs. Farm Hand Flower Company. During my time as a farmer, what was your best revenue stream, or what was the target market at the time? I sold at farmers markets, sold to florists. I sold to about 3 or 4 Whole Foods for a couple years. I sold flowers for weddings, for pick your own weddings. Basically, that was they had to come on Friday at 3 o'clock and shop from the cooler. They didn't really get to pick unless we needed more than what we already had harvested. And I only limited to 1 bride a day. If the second bride wanted to come, she had to come an hour later and get second choice. But that wasn't a big money maker. That's just another way to sell flowers. But for me, farmers markets were my biggest bulk of flowers. I was at 2 really good farmers markets, actually 3. One in DuPont Circle in D.C., and then Rockville and Kensington, 2 towns in Maryland, about 20 miles north of D.C. The Kensington and DuPont Circle were year-round. At DuPont Circle, I could sell $4,000 worth of flowers in a 3.5-hour market. Mother's Day would be pushing $6,000 worth of flowers. And I say flowers, I also sold plants, so that also included plants. It may have been $3,000 worth of flowers and $1,000 or $2,000 worth of plants in the springtime. But the farmers markets were the most lucrative. Whole Foods was just a way to move excess flowers. I gave them whatever didn't sell or we had too much of. I never gave them the good stuff, so to speak. In other words, if I didn't have much lisianthus, I didn't have enough for the markets, I didn't give any lisianthus in the bouquets to Whole Foods. And selling direct to florists, I did a bucket run for 4 or 5 years and then stopped doing that and only sold to a couple florists. They really appreciated the flowers and would buy enough to make it worth going to their business. Samantha wants to know, will I have any luck growing eucalyptus from plugs out in the field in zone 6B? They're currently outside with floating row cover over the bed. Yeah, you will. Even in 6B, you might be able to get them over winter. By the end of the summer, they'll probably be waist high, maybe a little bit higher. Eucalyptus likes it really hot. If you put that same eucalyptus in a tunnel, it'll grow 3 or 4 feet taller. I know somebody planted some silver dollar eucalyptus, the Sonera variety, last April. and it grew to be 12, 15 feet tall by the end of the summer. But it was in a high tunnel. But if you want to get it over winter, what you do is you prune it back to about 12 to 18 inches once you finish harvesting it, which would be a few weeks after your last frost, because it will take a light frost. Then you want to bury it with straw or leaves, and then put row cover over it, a couple layers of row cover. You're trying to keep the ground from freezing and keep them from being too wet and the wind drying them out. The upper branches and the trunk may die, but it should grow back from the root. And if you can get it to grow back from the root next year, it'll be 6, 7, 8 feet tall by the end of the summer. So yes, you can grow eucalyptus in the field, and it can be overwintered if you protect it. Garden Journey wants to know, will bells of Ireland continue to grow as the days get longer and hotter? No, bells of Ireland are a one-shot deal, a one-cut wonder. Once you cut it, you're done, and they're not a summer heat-loving plant. So that's why you usually treat them as a cool flower, planting them in the fall or very early spring. They're always best direct sown, and you would not be planting bells of Ireland now because they won't take the summer heat. Busy Cat, how do I begin selling to florists? I'm a new dahlia grower and I just gave them all away last year. The biggest thing with the florists, they want to know that you're consistent, you're going to be able to deliver to them every week, and you're going to have what they need. So in other words, you can't be growing 20 dahlia plants and think you're going to sell to a florist, because a florist is going to call up and say, I need 80 white dahlias for wedding 2 weeks from now. And if you can't supply that, they're going to go somewhere else and they're going to stop calling you. So if you're going to be selling to florists, and it's a wedding florist that does a lot of weddings, you're going to have the volume to sell to them. But the best way to start selling to florists is have a price list. You need to have some way to get in touch with you. You should have a website or Instagram. Show up at that shop. You can call and make an appointment or just go in. Never go on Thursday or Friday. They're working on weddings. Go earlier in the week. Take them in samples, their price list, and give them what day of the week you deliver to them. And make sure you can deliver that same day every week. And let them know your availability list is ready on Mondays at 9 a.m. or whatever time you decide. But you better have it ready every week at the same time and deliver it the same day every week. And then give them samples, but tell them to take the samples home or keep in the shop so they can see how good your flowers are compared to what they're used to. The worst thing you do is give the florist a bucket of samples and they sell them to somebody and they go away and they never know how long they last. So samples, you want to make sure the florist keeps them, but nothing beats them having your flowers in their hands. Wild Goose Meadow Farm wants to know, when is the best time to harvest viburnum? I'm guessing you're talking about the snowball viburnum, which is blooming now. You want to get it when it's still green, like a day or two before it starts to turn white, or like the first day or two after it turns white. Wait another week and you've got confetti. So you want to pick it earlier rather than later. The viburnum blooms on old wood, so the leafy stems you see growing this year will have flowers next year, so you don't want to prune those off if you can help it. And then also, with anytime you're doing any woody flower, you want to take all the leaves off, or almost all of them, so the water that's going up that stem goes to the flower and not to the leaves. Oh, here's a good question from Barbara. I've been growing cosmos for one florist who really loves it, but sometimes I have trouble timing the right stage to cut. Any tips? Well, my thing is you should be going out and cutting those cosmos, harvesting every single morning, and nothing's left on that plant that's open. You're harvesting flowers that are just starting to crack, they're still closed. If it's the double click, you want a little bit more open, but still not totally flat open. Harvest them all, get them in the cooler, and then go back out later that afternoon, and anything that's bloomed later that day, just pluck it off and throw it away. Because that way you know when you go to harvest in the next morning, every flower that's getting ready is a new, fresh flower that's good to cut. Twin Run Flower Farm. I left my LA hybrid lilies in the ground and they have come back huge, 5 feet tall and thick stems. Is this normal? Can I leave them in for a third year? You can leave the LA lilies in, just know they're always going to bloom at the same time every year, depending where you're at. I know where I was in Zone 7B, Maryland, they would bloom in second or third week of June. So in other words, if you're planting new lilies every year, you get to the point where you don't want to save them anymore because you have so many lilies blooming at the natural time when they bloom in late spring, early summer. You can leave them in there. The stems are going to get bigger as the bulb gets bigger. Eventually that bulb will split, then you get two smaller stems. A lot of times though, lilies, when they come back the next year, they're not as big because you've harvested the stem and they didn't regenerate the bulb as much. So you might have had a lily this year that had 5 flowers on it, and next year you might only have 2 or 3. But you can still use that stem with 2 or 3 flowers and just put it in a mixed bouquet, and then the price of that bouquet can go higher because it has lilies in it. Adrivander has a good question here. Should ranunculus be stored dry or in water, and how long can you store them? If you're going to sell them within a week, store them in water. If you're going to need to hold them longer because you have so many blooming you just can't move them all, store them dry. And when you store flowers dry, that usually means you never put them in water. You harvest them, make sure there's no dew or humidity on them, and then wrap them in paper, put them in a box, and put them in the cooler. Take them out the day before you want to use them, recut the stems, hydrate them, then put them back in the cooler for the next day's sales. But you can store them in water, like I said, a week, maybe 10 days at the most, and dry, you can do 3 or 4 weeks without any problem. Schoolhouse flowers. I'm about to order my very first irrigation system. With regards to meter spacing, what do you suggest if you're looking to plant the flowers quite tightly together? Some add a 3 or 4 inch spacing. So in other words, you're planting your flowers usually no closer than 6 inch spacing. In other words, if you ever use the flower support netting, it's a 6 inch square, so it usually gets one plant in the center of each square, unless you're doing lisianthus. Sometimes you can put 1 in some holes and 2 in other ones. And then the other exception are stock and cut flower kale. They get 3 plants in every square, so 12 plants per square foot. But as far as your irrigation, a lot of that depends on the kind of soil you have. If you have sandy soil, the water goes straight down. You have really soil high in organic matter, the water's going to go more horizontal, more of a triangle down as opposed to straight down like in sand. So that makes a difference. You have a really fast draining soil, you need to have your drip tape closer together. If your soil is really high in organic matter and the water kind of just flows horizontal, then you can space it 6 or 8 inches or even 12 inches apart. But the drippers going down the drip tape is usually done at 6 inch spacing. You know, the little spot where it drips out. And here's a person who was redoing the farm, the new field. It was a cow field, which that's good. Cows don't leave behind as many weed seeds as horses do. But you want to still get rid of all that grass and do a soil test and amend as needed so you get nice, good soil. Petal pickers. Hi, Daniel. I ordered some of the new sorghum seed to grow for fall. Are there any tips for starting sorghum in the hot zone 8B, or is it easy? Sorghum is basically a grain. It should be easy to plant anytime up until early June. After that, the problem gets where the soil's too hot and you can't keep it moist enough for the seed to germinate. It's usually direct sown. You could do transplants if you want, but it's usually direct sown. But yeah, get it planted by early June and you'll have beautiful seed heads in late summer, August into October. Somebody's asking how to keep coral bells blooming. They're a one and done. You won't be able to get more flowers out of them. So once you've picked them all, move on to the next crop, next variety of flowers. Vidalia Florals. I have a small farm and had some dahlia gall last season. Can I plant zinnias or other flowers there? Yes. Most gall is very specific to a type of plant. So if you had dahlia leafy gall, it should not affect anything else. Should be okay. And Dina and Denise are asking, is there a way to help sunflower stems get thicker? Wind, harder watering? Maybe. Yes. If you have a little breeze, wind makes thicker stems, and also your spacing. If you're really close together, they're going to have a thinner stem. You can take the same variety of sunflower, plant at 6 inch spacing. It's going to have a stem the size of your finger. If you plant them 8 or 10 inches apart, the stem's going to be thicker like a broomstick. Same seed, same variety, just the spacing makes a difference. But also as far as making them stronger and sturdier, wind does make a difference. If you don't have breeze in your area, just walking on the row and rubbing it with your hand will help stiffen them up too. So I think I'm done for the day. Thanks everybody for joining. Again, I'm Dave Dowling with Ball Seed or Ball Color Link. And I also have the online class with the Gardener's Workshop, bulbs, perennials, woodies, and more. If you've taken my class, you know how helpful it has been to your business. If you haven't taken it yet, take a look at it over at thegardenersworkshop.com. You can see all the classes that are offered and find one that's right for you that can help your cut flower business thrive. Till next time, bye-bye.
Okay, welcome back. Gosh, we're so honored to have Dave guest hosting Ask a Flower Farmer from time to time. I know I learn something new from him every time I hear him speak, and I hope you do too. So I've posted links in the show notes to some of the things he mentioned here, including a link to a page on our website where you can check out Dave's online course called Flower Farming School Online, Bulbs, Perennials, Woodies, and more. If you're interested in attending an Ask a Flower Farmer Q&A live, you'll find those weekly on our Instagram account, each Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. These sessions are normally hosted by Lisa Mason-Ziegler, but we do have guest hosts periodically as well, so I encourage you to check it out. That's all today, flower friends. If you like what you're hearing here on the Field and Garden Podcast, we'd love it if you'd tell a friend about us and leave a review for us wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Jessie from the Gardener's Workshop, and I hope you have a great day.